Thomas Paine.
Religious distress is at the same time the expression of real distress. Religion is the sigh of the oppressed creature, the heart of a heartless world, just as it is the spirit of a spiritless situation. It is the opium of the people. The demand to give up the illusion is the demand to give up a condition which needs illusions.
Now, whatever Freud thought about the infantile origins of the illusion, for the Russian communists who had been influenced by the dialectical materialism of Karl Marx, it was an article of faith that the opium of religion would have no place in the forthcoming political millennium. They were determined to establish an illusion-free zone, and in Soviet Russia, indeed, they established what was, to all intents and purposes, the first fundamentally atheist state. The paradox is that a revolution which was designed to usher in a new golden era for humanity, tormented, tortured, imprisoned and annihilated even more victims than Christianity at its most excessive. So it's hardly surprising that atheism has been indelibly, if unjustly, stained by its association. By the end of the 20th century, disbelief had become much more widespread than ever. And although it's not the whole story, there's no doubt that some of the appalling social catastrophes of the last 100 years have seriously undermined faith in a benevolent God. Of course, cruelty and misfortune have always been cited as reasons for doubt. But the inescapable publicity which these excesses now receive in the mass media represent an unprecedented problem for the pious. In fact, as we enter the 21st century, for many people, the questions of belief and disbelief seem scarcely worth considering. This brings me back to the very first person I talked to in this series, the English philosopher in New York, Colin McGinn.
Nobody spends their time trying to prove to others that the Greek gods don't exist. You know, you just decide that they don't, and that's the end of the story for you. So I like to distinguish atheism from anti-theism. Anti-theism is opposition to theism. I am an anti-theist because I believe that religion is harmful. I'm not just an atheist who's somebody, my only values are that I don't agree with it. I'm actively opposed to it. But then I distinguish that from what I call post-theism or post-atheism, which is the healthy state of mind where you've put all that behind you. Now, we can't do that yet because there's lots of religion in the world and lots of bad results of it. But to me, the ideal society would be one in which the question of religion didn't really arise for people, or if it did, it wasn't a heavy question for them. They would say to each other, you know, those humans used to believe back there in 2003, some of them believed there was this God and he did this, others didn't, and they did TV programs about why they didn't. What a funny debate that was, you know. So it would be a post-theist society where it wasn't an issue.
It's quite hard to imagine what the world would be like without religion. For the simple reason that, in one form or another, it's been with us for so long. And although the number of disbelievers is now larger than anyone could have imagined as little as 100 years ago, religion still permeates social life. And in some parts of the world, it's more consolidated and oppressive than ever. So that for those like myself, and there are literally millions of us for whom there is no religion, we still live in a world in which it's difficult to be unaware of its existence. For obvious reasons, it's some of the more fanatical developments which get me most worked up. The wilder excesses of Christian creationism, and of course the suicidal and sometimes the homicidal violence to be found in some parts of the Muslim world. But I'm also rattled by some of the more complacent assumptions, which I find amongst my friends and acquaintances, that my godlessness implies some sort of lack of seriousness on my part, that people like me have failed to recognize the existence of the soul, and above all, of its immortality. Well, to be quite frank, I find this somewhat impudent. The fact that I entertain no prospects whatever of some sort of subsequent existence doesn't mean that I'm indifferent to the fact that I, like everyone else, must die. As I get older, I become more closely, if vicariously, acquainted with death and disease. In fact, as time goes by, I find myself opening the obituary pages of the newspapers with increasing apprehension. But all the same, I don't find myself wondering where these departed friends, relatives or colleagues now are, because as far as I'm concerned, they're nowhere. They have simply, or perhaps not quite so simply, ceased to be. So how about my own death, my own ceasing to be? Well, naturally I think about it because I'm much nearer to it now than I was. I think about how it will be. Will it be painful, for example? But still, I don't think about it in terms of, will I, after all I've committed myself to, be shown to be a fool by waking up somewhere else and finding that there is something after all? And will my face be red? The thought of death is constantly there. I know that it's unlikely now that I'll see my grandchildren get married, or that I'll even see or know my great-grandchildren. In other words, I have to loosen my hold over the future. What's more, I may be in a situation where death can't come too quickly because I'll be in pain, distressed, weak and disabled. I want to be able to reach for the bell and say, this is where I get off. I don't find it difficult to imagine not existing. I don't think about it at all, really. What I am frightened of is perhaps that near death there might be certain experiences associated with it which are painful and frightening, and from which one cannot escape for the moment. It's not the fear of death, but of the mental states that sometimes exist when things are falling to bits. I'm not looking forward to that. But I am encouraged by the fact that there are perfectly ordinary people who confront their forthcoming extinction with graceful equanimity, without having to fall back on unintelligible hopes for a future state. When I visited Gloria at St. Christopher's Hospice in London, she was quite happy to talk about her lack of faith. She only asked that we did not show her face, from which I alone could see that she approached her death with unexpected calm. Were you religious as a girl?
I suppose I did, Sunday school and the regular so-and-so, sort of looking at choir boys and...
That's not religion, dear, that's flirty. But do you think that when you die, that you will continue to exist?
No.